Okay, so let's go ahead and start graphing a couple of rational functions. So we're going to start with the first one. So f of x is equal to 3x over x minus 5. Okay, so let's start off with this one. So remember that what we want to be able to do first is, if we look at all of our steps, we want to try to factor everything. So notice that there's no factors. We can't factor anymore, so we can't really do it. So we're done. Okay, so then the next thing is to find the x and y-intercepts. So why don't we try to do that? Usually, I like to find the, you can also find the vertical asymptotes first as well. It doesn't really matter. So let's find the x and the y-intercepts. So x-intercepts, remember that that's when the y is equal to 0. So we're going to get 0 is equal to 3x over x minus 5. When I move the x minus 5 over, it goes away, so you get 0 equals 3x. So x equals 0. Okay, so basically the x-intercept is going to be 0, comma 0. Okay, so I'm going to box that. The y-intercept, remember, that happens when x is equal to 0. Okay, so then I'm going to have y is equal to 3 times 0 divided by 0 minus 5. You can see that this is also going to give me 0. So basically, this graph is going to go through the origin. Okay. All right, so we found the x and the y-intercepts. Now, clearly there's no holes because nothing is going to cancel out. Do not cancel out these x's. That's wrong. That is a really bad mistake because these are not factors. The bottom ones are terms. The top part is multiplication. All right, so here we're going to have a vertical asymptote. So let's find our asymptotes. Remember, vertical asymptote is by setting the denominator equal to 0. So you're going to have x minus 5 is equal to 0. So then you're going to get x is equal to 5. So x equals to 5 is a vertical asymptote. Okay, now we're going to look for our horizontal asymptote. Our horizontal asymptote, notice here that the degree of the numerator is equal to the degree of the denominator. They're both the same. So what we're going to do is that y is our horizontal asymptote is going to be the ratio of the leading coefficients, which in this case is going to be 3 over 1, which is just going to be 3. So my horizontal asymptote is at y equals 3. Okay, so right now we have kind of figured out everything. There's no slant asymptote because it's not, the numerator is not one more than the denominator. So now the next thing that we want to do is sketch the graph. So this is how I kind of like to do it. So the way that I like to do is that I like to write down first my x and y axis. So here's x and y. Then I like to write my vertical asymptote, which in this case is the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here is my vertical asymptote. Then I like to write my horizontal asymptote, which is y equals 3. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we have that. So my graph kind of looks like this. So now we have to be very careful with, because now we have x-intercepts as well. We know that this is going to go through 0, 0. Okay. Now what we kind of want to do, we kind of want to think about, well, we kind of have 4 different quadrants. Where exactly is the graph going to be? So here's where you kind of have to think about the rational function. So the rational is going to have to go through this point, okay? We know that it cannot cross this vertical asymptote, so that means that the graph should kind of get close to here, okay? And then it's eventually going to cross 0, 0, okay? So then, and it's going to keep going, and notice that at that point, it's just going to level off here, okay? One thing that you can do is you can try to plot another point. So if you wanted to plot like -1, for example, so you can plot that in there into the original. So 3 times -1 divided by -1 minus 5. On the top, you're going to get a -3. On the bottom, you're going to get a -4, which is going to give me 3/4. So that means this guy is going to be about 3/4. Now, obviously, I drew it a little bit lower, but I kind of wanted to give you a glimpse of what this actually would look like. So if you think about, maybe -1 is way too far. So if you think of -1 here, and 3/4 is right here, okay, so it's going to go right through that point. And you can draw many other points if you want to. Just this is kind of how that thing is going to look like. Okay, it's not going to be in the top part because remember it has to go through 0, 0. Now, what about this guy? This guy, we have no information if it's going to be on the top or on the bottom. So one really good way to do it is just let's plot in a point. So we know that the vertical asymptote is at 5, so let's plug in 6 to kind of see, is this 6, when I plug in 6, is it going to be greater than 3, above 3, or is it going to be below 3? So I'm going to plug in the 6, so 3 times 6, and then -1 minus 6. So on the top, you're going to get an 18. On the bottom, you're going to get a -7. Okay, so that's wrong. On the bottom part, I was plugging in the previous one. You're going to put a 6 and then a -1. Okay. All right. Oh, -5. Oh, gosh. Okay. 6 minus 5. Okay, so there's going to be a 1. This is going to give me 18. All right. So at 6, you're going to be all the way up to 18, which basically means that the graph is going to look like this. It's going to be right at the top. Okay. So you kind of want to be able to give me a general sketch. You can graph more points if you want to kind of be able to make it a little nicer. This is just giving you a general overview of what exactly this graph is basically doing. Okay. All right. So let's do another problem. So let's say we want to look at, I don't know, r of x is equal to 3x plus 1 over x minus 2. Okay, so here we have something very similar to the previous one, but now we have a plus 1. So how is that going to change everything? So first steps first. The first thing that we're going to do is find the x and the y-intercepts, or factor it, but notice that you can't factor it anymore. So x and y-intercepts. Okay, so for x-intercept, I'm going to set the y equal to 0. So 0 is equal to 3x plus 1 over x minus 2. When I move the denominator over, you're going to get 0 equals 3x plus 1. So x here equals -1/3. So that means at -1/3, comma 0, you're going to have an x-intercept. So now the y-intercept is going to be when x is equal to 0. You're going to get 3 times 0 plus 1, 0 minus 2. So you're going to get a -1/2. So at 0, comma -1/2, you're going to have a y-intercept. Okay, so now the next thing that we're going to do, notice there's no holes. We're going to find the vertical asymptote. The vertical asymptote is going to be found by taking the denominator and setting it equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0. So that means x equals 2 is going to be a vertical asymptote. Do we have any horizontal asymptote? Yeah, we do, because notice that the denominator and the numerator have equal degrees. So this is going to be at y equals 3 over 1, which is 3. So we get another 3 again. And now finally, let's just go ahead and try to sketch this out. So let's sketch this. Okay, so I have my x and I have my y. My vertical asymptote is at 2. So I'm going to draw my vertical asymptote right there. My horizontal asymptote is going to be, my HA is going to be at 3. Okay, then I have a couple points. I have -1/3, 0. That's my x-intercept. So -1/3. So if I think about this being my -1, so -1/3 is going to be around here. So here's -1/3. And then 0, comma -1/2, that's going to be right here. So if I think about this guy being -1, -1/2 is going to be right here. So basically, if you look at the quadrants, you kind of already have an idea of where the other one's going to be. Okay, so the other one, this guy is going to be here, because it's going to be crossing these two different points. Okay, and then leveling off. So that one was really easy. We know that it's not going to be on the top. Now for the other two, well, again, we can put in a number. So we can write in a number like 3 if you want. I'm going to plug it back into the equation. So 3 times 3 plus 1 divided by 3 minus 2. Let's see if that number is going to be greater than 3 or less than 3. So you're going to have a 9 plus 1 divided by 1. So you're going to get 10. So that means it's going to be way up there. Okay? So basically this graph is going to look something like that and then level off. Okay? So it kind of looks something like that. Okay, so let's do a couple more. Let's do part C. Let's say we wanted to do y is equal to 6 over x squared minus 5x minus 6. Okay. So here, this is a perfect opportunity for us to factor this. So we're going to factor out the bottom part. So here's an x, and then this one's going to be a 3 and a 2, or a 6 and a 1. Let's see. What is this going to be? No, it has to be 6 and 1. 6 and 1. And then this guy's going to be a negative. This guy's going to be a positive. Okay. All right. So notice things didn't cancel out. So there's no holes here. Let's find the the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So x-intercept, we're going to let y equal 0. So you're going to have 0 is equal to 6 over x minus 6, x plus 1. Notice that the bottom part is going to go to the other side, but you get 0 equals 6. That means that there's no x-intercept. That means that this guy is not going to cross the x-axis at all. Okay, what about the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept, what's going to happen is that it's going to go, you're going to let your x's be 0, so 6 over, you can choose the top one if you want, 0 squared minus 5 times 0 minus 6. You're going to get y is equal to 6 divided by negative 6 gives me negative 1. So basically, 0 comma negative 1 is going to be the y-intercept. Okay. All right, so now let's do the vertical asymptotes. So if you have vertical asymptotes, you're going to set the denominator equal to 0. So we have x minus 6, x plus 1. We're going to set this equal to 0. So you're going to have x equals 6 as a vertical asymptote and x equals negative 1 as a vertical asymptote. There's no slant asymptotes because the degree of the top is not bigger. Horizontal asymptotes, you can see here that the degree of the top is less than the degree of the bottom one, which means that y equals 0 is going to be the horizontal asymptote. Okay. And now finally, let's just graph this out using the information that we just acquired. Okay. X and Y, we're going to start off with our asymptotes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here is my vertical asymptote. Have another vertical asymptote at negative 1. So here's negative 1. Okay. And then I have y equals 0. So at y equals 0 is my horizontal asymptote. So right at this line. So you have many different quadrants. So at y equals 0, you have this asymptote. Okay, now this graph is never going to cross it because notice how we don't have any x-intercepts. Okay, so now we do have a y-intercept at negative 1. Okay, 0, comma negative 1. You have something that looks like this. Okay, so now at this point, what we want to do is let's go ahead and try to plug a couple points in. So to the left of negative 1, let's plug in a random point. Let's plug in like negative 2. Okay, so what is that going to be? So we need to see, is it going to be greater than 0 or less than 0? So I'm going to choose this guy to plug in the points into. So 6 x minus, what was it? X minus 6, x plus 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in x equals negative 2. 6 over negative 2 minus 6. and then -2 plus 1. So you're going to have a 6. The bottom one is going to be, so this guy is going to be a negative number. This is going to be another negative number, which is going to give me a positive. So 6 divided by a positive number is going to give me a positive number, which means that it's going to be up here. Okay, so basically this graph will be in the positive side, looking something like that. Okay. All right, now let's look at this part. Now notice that this guy has to be in the negative side. Okay, this guy has to be in the negative because if this point is right here, then that means that it has to cross it. Has to cross this point. It can't go back up. So what do you think it has to do? It's gonna have to go back down. Okay. So in order to do that, you can kind of think of a couple points, plug in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you want to, 5.1, 5.3, whatever you want. You can see that this is the only option that it can be. There's really no other option because it can't go through it. And if there is, that means that we did the x-intercept wrong. Okay, and then finally, let's figure out what's going on the other side. So let's plug in 7. 6 over x minus 6, x plus 1. Let's plug in 7. We're going to have 6 over 7 minus 6, 7 plus 1. So you have a 6 on the top, a positive number on the bottom, and another positive number. So that's just going to give me another positive number, which means that this guy is going to be up here. Just like that. So that's what this graph is going to look like. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video here and we're going to do a couple more in the next one.